training Russia's military to use their deadly drones. The Biden administration says the goal of the training is to use the drones with better lethality after recent strikes in Kyiv and elsewhere 8 months into the war. Just moments ago, I spoke to one of the top officials within the Biden White House about that. Take a listen. Joining me now is the top national security spokesman for the White House, John Kirby. John, I appreciate your being with us. I want to drill down on some of this as it relates to Iran and Ukraine. How many Iranians does the U.S. assess are in Ukraine? Is it technical support or training, and is it anything beyond training?
Right now, we assess that this is technical support and training. It's a relatively small number. I think I'm going to leave it at that. Just a relatively small number of Iranians that are on the ground. They're in Crimea. And we think that part of the reason they're there is because the initial shipment of these drones led to some operator and equipment errors that the Russians were having trouble with in terms of using them and being able to operate them, having some system failures. And so the Iranians went ahead and flew in some of these tech support trainers. But this is the clear evidence that Iran is right now on the ground, involved, engaged in the war in Ukraine.
John, let me follow up on as it relates to Iran. Have any evidence that Iran is planning to provide missiles to Russia?
What we've seen is support along the line of UAVs, and that's what we're seeing now. That's
Those
what we're
the armed drones, the unmanned drones.
Unmanned drones, yes. That's should we make that clear, but that's what we've seen. That's the support that we're talking about right now.
And so, just for clarity, there's no indication at this time of any missiles. Do you believe that they are preparing to do that? Is there any concern that's in the offing?
Yeah, Peter, we've seen some of the press reporting around the possibility of ballistic missiles being involved in there. We don't have any indication that has come to pass. Iran does have a burgeoning and improving ballistic missile capability, which is worrisome in the region all by itself. And again, we'll watch and see where this goes. I would just say that we have held Iran accountable for the launching of the drones to Russia through sanctions, both in terms of their defense industrial base as well as individuals. And we are not going to take off the table additional measures of accountability, particularly in the sanctions regime, as we continue to support Russia's efforts in Ukraine.
And John, we've been watching along with you and everybody across the world, frankly, as Russia's just continued this bombardment, now destroying so much of the energy infrastructure there in Ukraine. How is the U.S. helping Ukraine prepare for these cold weather months as that continues to happen? Is there anything you can do to further defend the surviving infrastructure?
We are working hard with allies and partners to see what we can do on the energy front to support Ukraine. They have been weathering this pretty well so far and trying to get their power back online. The majority of the country does have power, but certainly this is a concern, and we're working closely with President Zelensky and his team to see what would be needed going forward as we get into what is likely to be a very cold winter here for much of Ukraine. We're also doing what we can to help the Ukrainian armed forces get ready for the winter months. And just out of the Brussels meeting that Secretary Austin held, additional donations of winter gear for the Ukrainian army, that came through. So we're doing what we can for them as well.
John, we've been keeping a close eye, obviously, to the reporting about the former President Trump having documents that include classified papers containing U.S. secrets. The Washington Post now reporting that those secrets also noted Iran and that they were about Iran and China specifically. The Post says that's according to people familiar with the matter. Are you aware of the administration doing anything right now to try to protect sources and methods as it relates to this information that could be compromised vis-a-vis China, Iran, and beyond?
I'm not going to talk about an ongoing investigation here or work that the intelligence community is doing to take a look at these documents. I think
What's
you
the
can
potential
understand
risk to
we
the
wouldn't wanna
U.S., I guess?
I would just say that in general, in every case, all around the world and on every day, we believe it's important to safeguard classified and confidential information and to make sure that we are doing what we can to continue to be able to access collect, analyze information from around the world for our own intelligence purposes. The protection of sources and methods is always a concern for the United States of America, and it will be going forward. But again, I don't want to talk about this particular case and those particular documents.
I understand. Let me ask you, as long as we were talking about China, let me stay in that region, ask you about North Korea right now. Are there any signs that the North Koreans are planning a nuclear test in the near future?
We have said, and have been saying it for months, Peter, that another nuclear test could happen at any time. Now, again, I'm not going to get into intelligence assessments, but we're watching this as closely as we can. Obviously,
of course, Sean, the reason this is notable now is because the Chinese are soon going to be wrapping up their Communist Party Congress, right? So there's some sense that after that, perhaps North Korea may be motivated to do something.
Well, I don't know what exactly will motivate Kim Jong-un one way or the other, and I think we need to be a little bit careful ascribing it to dates on the calendar. We've said, again, that another nuclear test could occur at any time. We've been very honest about that. We're watching it as closely as we can. Of course, we've always seen additional missile launches that the North has been conducting in the last few weeks. All of that is of concern to us because it's just going to destabilize the region. And that's why, Peter, we have increased our own intelligence collection efforts. So that's why we're doing these additional bilateral and sometimes trilateral exercises with our Japanese and South Korean counterparts to make sure that militarily speaking, if we need to be, we're going to be ready to go.
Yeah, John Kirby is the top national security spokesperson for the White House. John, I appreciate you making time. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Bodewell gets appliance support started right away. Whether it's virtual guidance to get to the root of the problem.
The Ukrainian military continues a counter-offensive in the strategic Kherson region, an area that was annexed and put under martial law by Russian President Vladimir Putin. So let's have a look in a bit more detail on the situation on the ground. We're joined now by retired Air Vice Marshal Sean Bell. Sean, good to see you again. So a big picture sort of breakdown for us, first of all, on that situation on the ground.
Yeah, I mentioned it. Hassan, start off there. The Ukrainians are tightening the noose around the tens of thousands of Russian troops that are held up in there. Russian officials have been told to leave by the Kremlin, and there's also reports of some of the Russian soldiers running around in civilian attire, almost certainly is that so they can get off away from Kherson without attracting the attention of the media. General Surovikin, who's the most senior Russian general looking after all the Russian forces in Ukraine, has hinted that the situation is not going well in Kherson, which is unheard of that they would admit such weakness, but it seems to be setting the conditions for a Russian withdrawal from the city. We'll have to wait and see. Interestingly, President Zelensky has also accused Russia of mining the Kakhovka hydroelectric dam right up in top here, right one of the very few crossing points for the Dnieper River for the Russians, because obviously all the bridges go elsewhere. Now, if the Russians were to blow that dam, which they've actually occupied since the start of the war, there's massive flooding down the Dnieper River, but also all the way around Kherson. What looks most likely is if the Russians are planning to withdraw, if they were to blow that dam, they would flood that river, flood Kherson, and therefore cover their retreat. The challenge would be it also devastate water supplies to the south of Ukraine, and also that's where the cooling water for the reactors at Zaporizhzhia comes from.
Let's touch as well, Sean, on that issue of reports that there are Iranian troops in Crimea helping the Russian operate drones. I mean, how significant is that?
Yeah, the last 10 days, the Russians have been focusing on targeting Ukrainian energy infrastructure all across the country. Let's be fair, these are not military targets. It's much more about terrorizing the military population, the civilian population. They've been using these Iranian drones, these Shahib 136. We've covered them in some detail on previous days. You tend to think of drones as being slow with very limited endurance. These drones, they're generally launched out of Crimea, but their range is well over 1,000 miles, and that takes them anywhere in the country of Ukraine. It might take quite a long time to get there, but they certainly got the range for that. Iran has deployed some extra people, military expertise to support the operation of the Russians of operating these drones out of Crimea, and as a result of that technical support and the arrival of these drones, both the UK and the US have imposed additional sanctions on Iran.
And then, Sean, just talk us through the significance of that story that Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, told us about yesterday from a few weeks ago, where a British aircraft, nearly got shot down by a Russian aircraft, or is that still on?
Well, it's an amazing story, this, because the event happened on the 29th of September, over 3 weeks ago. It was only announced by Ben Wallace yesterday. Su-27 flanker, we've got a picture of one here, Russian fighter aircraft, released a missile very close to a Royal Air Force aeroplane that was operating just over the Black Sea. The target was a Royal Air Force RC-135 joint aeroplane. We've got a picture of one here. These provide the eyes and the ears over the battlefield. They routinely fly over the Black Sea, a crew of about 30 on board. The Russians claim that this was a result of a technical malfunction. Well, as you know, I'm a former fighter pilot myself, and I can tell you that technical malfunctions do not lead to the firing of missiles. That is completely implausible. What's much more likely is the Russians are very frustrated at the West's use of air and space power to support Ukraine, and as a result, they've almost certainly been trying to try their luck. The flights of the RC-135 have resumed again, but now they have Typhoon aircraft providing armed escort. But if this story had turned out differently, if the Russians had been successful, if the missile had hit this target, it would have massively escalated the whole situation, and we'd be covering a very different story.
Certainly would. Sean, thanks so much, as always.
Praise Yahweh, Shabbat Kakadash, Shalom. The wildest of the elders and apostles, and men in truth on down for the truth and knowledge. The Wadi Yahweh Shabbat for putting the spirit of the elders and apostles, and the men on down with all this truth and knowledge. Call Yahweh Shabbat Kakadash. Give all praise Yahweh Shabbat Kakadash. 2 videos, Sky News talking about Iran is back in Russian attacks, and the other one was talking about, Iran declares war, UK. That was MSNBC interview with John Kirby, national intelligence for the Biden administration, and Sky News and MSNBC, and some articles here talking about Iran has declared war on Britain in the West. A day ago, that was the Telegraph, Reuters, Atlantic Council, Reuters, France 24, PBS NewsHour. The State Department says U.S. will back sanctions against Iran over drone sales. That was a few days ago. Putin declares martial law related to annexed regions in Ukraine. Iran breaching nuclear deal by providing Russia with armed drones. That's why they attacked them cities. They were manufactured by Iran. The kamikaze, if you relate to them kamikaze, kamikaze S drones. A few articles. Get some scriptures real quick. Ecclesiastes 3 and 8. A time to love, a time to hate, a time of war, and a time of peace. So we're in the time of war, man. Matthew 24:6. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. So you hearing of wars and rumors of wars and actual wars that's going on in these different countries: Iran, Israel, Syria, Ukraine, Russia. Tensions between ultimately China, Taiwan, possibly different things. So you hearing of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, be not troubled, be not dismayed. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So all these things are part of what has to happen. 7. A nation shall rise against nation. You see the nations rise against one another. You see the kingdoms going against one another. And there shall be famines, shortages, precursors, pestilence. So you see in that relates to plagues, earthquakes in different places. So different kinds of calamities and miseries happening in the latter times, man. That's going on right now, man. Hearing the wars, rumors of wars is one of the biggest ones. 28. All these are the beginnings of sorrows. So that's what we're in. They're times of sorrows. It is a joy to the just to do judgment, but the destruction shall be to the what? Workers of iniquity, which is the wicked. That's what's ultimately going to happen. That's Proverbs 21 and 15, man. So we seeing these nations build up for war. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty man, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. So the mighty men, the ones who are going to fight in war, the ones in valor, they're rising up, man. They're preparing for what? War. Beat your plowshares into swords and pruning hooks, into the spears, and let the weak say I am strong. So these nations that were not as militarily capable, now they are, man. So they no longer saying they're weak, they're saying they're strong. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, gather yourselves together round about. Cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Lord. Let the heathen be awakened, come out of the valley of Yahweh Shaphat, for he has judged, for the Lord has judged, for I will sit to judge all the heathens round about. So the Lord is going to judge the nations. Put ye the sickle, and the harvest is ripe. Come get you down, for the press is full, the fats overflow, for their wickedness is great, man. So the judgment is ripe for judgment, man. Multitude in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near, the valley of decision, man. Yahweh Shaphat, man. Middle East, man. So all these nations are going to gather together to prepare for war, man. There was a verse relating to that. Let your weaklings, something like their weaklings, let your weaklings become warriors, man. So that relates to specifically for the ones who get drafted, because there's going to be a draft, you know what I mean? Because more people are going to be needed, you know what I mean? That's a future prophecy. Go to 2nd Ezra 16, I believe 33 and 34. And I believe Isaiah 3 and 15. So it's going to be war, man. It's going to be a draft, and many are going to go to war. And some are going to go over in that region relating to, you know, fight, man. Ezekiel 38, and the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set thy face on Gog and Magog, and the chief of prince of Meshach and Tubal, the prince against them, the Russians, and say, Thus saith the Lord, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. So the Lord is against the Russians, man. And I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thy armies, horses, and horses represents the power. So them armies, man, related to their military power, their personnel, pretty much their assortment of accessories, man, military accessories. And horsemen, all of them clothed all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords, man. So part of that assortment of military is their nuclear armament and their missiles, man. Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, with them, all of them with shields and helmets. Pretty much Iran, Turkey, these other nations, man. Gomer and all his bands, and the house of Togomar of the North Quarters, and all his bands, many with thee. So all these nations are going to band with Russia, Iran, Turkey, the African nations. Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled into thee, and be thou guard into them. So all these nations are going to be assembled in a guard to what? Russia, man. By stating Iran, Turkey, the African nations. You seeing Iran back in relating to Russia, man. So that fits with Ezekiel 38, man. So precursors of Ezekiel 38 is being played out. Okay, Ezekiel 38. So we're in a time of war, man. All them nations that band together with Russia, you know, Iran, Turkey, African nations, you know, versus pretty much the other side, man, which would be Israel, U.S., and its allies, man. This was something short. I hope it helps in some way. Give all praise, Yahweh Shem Yoshua Bashem Rakakadash. Shalom. Zayab. Shalom.